Before cutting a key on the Sidewinder, there are 4 basic steps that must be taken. Align the cutter and guide to each other, align the cutter and guide to the pattern key, align keys properly, and use the proper cutting procedure. This step must be done anytime a cutter or guide is changed in the machine, or if you change the vices. Once this step is complete, you do not have to repeat it for each key you make. Insert 2 identical keys into the vices. Flat steel keys are ideal. Be sure the vices are on the same side. With the vice table all the way towards the user, insert the guide into the left collet until it bottoms out. Tighten the Allen screw to secure the guide in place. Be sure that the depth adjusting knob is on set, the cutter head clamp nut is loosened, and the guide lock knob is loosened. Insert the cutter into the right collet, but do not tighten it. Slide the vice table under the cutter and guide so that the blank keys are positioned directly below the cutter and guide. Allow the cutter to drop down onto the surface of the key blank. Next, pull down on the spindle lever until the guide is completely compressed. There should be no up-down movement to the guide if it is fully compressed. While the guide is being compressed, you should be able to see the cutter being pushed up into its collet. With the spindle lever pulled down completely, tighten the cutter head clamp nut. This will hold the cutter head assembly in the lowered position, and you can remove your hand from the spindle lever. Check the guide once again to make sure there is no up-down travel. Next, tighten the cutter with the 1/8 inch Allen wrench supplied in the drawer. The cutter and guide are now calibrated properly to each other. Before actually cutting the key, you must set the proper depth of cut for the particular key you are about to cut. This must be done without a key in the right side vise. Also, if you are cutting several copies of the same kind of key, all Mercedes 4-track for instance, you do not have to repeat this step for each key. Loosen the cutter head clamp nut, guide lock knob, and be sure the depth adjusting knob is indicating set. Insert the pattern key into the left vise and lock it into place. The key must be positioned flat in the vise. Position the cutout portion of the pattern key under the guide and pull down on the spindle lever until the guide contacts the key. Continue downward pressure until the guide shaft bottoms out and the downward movement of the spindle lever stops. Do not use excessive pressure. This step is critical. You must set the proper cut depth for this particular style of key. While maintaining pressure on the spindle lever, tighten the cutter head clamp nut to fix the cutting head of the machine in place. You can now relax pressure on the spindle lever. It should remain in the lower position. As a check, the cutter and guide should visually be at the same depth, and the guide should have no up-down travel to it. Also, the guide is pressing down on the pattern key, and smooth movement of the table would be difficult. Do not move the table yet. This will be taken care of in the next 2 steps. Turn the depth adjusting knob to the 10 position. You should feel a D10 at this position. This adds 10 thousandths of clearance between the guide collet and the depth screw. You will not see any movement of the guide in this step, however. Lift up on the guide until it stops. You should notice a very slight upward movement of the guide, 10 thousandths of travel. Hold the guide in this position with your right hand and tighten the guide lock knob. This will hold the guide in the upper position. You should now be able to move the table back and forth without any resistance. Next, insert the key blank to be cut into the right side vise and tighten it into place. You are now ready to cut the key. Be sure that both keys you have inserted into the vise are inserted in the same way, according to the loading instructions found in your manual. Using proper cutting procedure will assure smooth cuts and cutter longevity. Determine what type of key you are cutting from the illustration in your manual, and follow the cut direction as shown. Once you have finished cutting a key, you should reset the machine so it is ready for the next key. Remove both keys from the vices. Loosen the cutter head clamp nut, guide lock knob, and turn the depth adjusting knob back to set. The machine is now ready for the next key. If you have several of the same types of keys to be cut, you do not need to reset the machine after each key. The Sidewinder machine has no user adjustment for side-to-side spacing. The machine is set at the factory and should require no adjustment. The only other adjustment to the machine is the depth of cut, which is detailed in your manual on page 7 and 8. The carriage tension screw on the right side of the machine adjusts the side-to-side tension on the vise table. Adjust the screw so there is some pressure, but not so much as to cause problems moving the table. The vise table of the machine rides on hardened steel pins and roller bearings and should never need lubrication. Cutters should be changed if they do not easily cut a key or if excessive vibration is felt. You can also visually check a cutter to assure there are no nicks in the cutter. Some customers prefer to add a small drop of cutting oil to the cutter or the surface of the key before cutting for longer cutter life. Small and compact, the Sidewinder can handle all of your high security duplication needs. The Sidewinder is backed by a 1-year parts, labor, and freight warranty.